In recent weeks, there has been a small storm brewing on social media. An atheist activist and ex-Muslim posted derogatory pictures of the goddess Kali on the internet. Hurt by the insult, a minority of Hindus piled on abuse and even resulted to threatening behaviour. Many were shocked at the Hindu outrage, and in response, various spiteful exchanges took place. The incident raises the question of how Hindus should react in such situations. But before we look at what could be the appropriate response, in the face of such mockery, perhaps now is the time to appreciate who Kali is. Hinduism understands that God, the ultimate truth, has innumerable attributes. These various dimensions of life also exist as personalities who make up the various deities. Kali is the energy of unbridled chaos and destruction. She is ferocious and extreme. She does not conform to the rules or the expectations of society. She is Shakti, pure power and divine intensity. In the Devi Mahatmya, we hear about the demon Raktabija, who has been gifted with a special boon. Any time a drop of blood falls on the ground, a new version of himself springs up. During the battle with Devi, he goes on multiplying, causing havoc and mayhem. In what seems like a hopeless situation, Kali appears and makes a dramatic move. She spreads out her tongue across the whole battlefield and catches every drop that spills from Raktabija. The Devi Mahatmya shows us that whenever we are about to be overwhelmed with negativity, whenever we are faced with an extreme situation, we need an extreme reaction to set things right. This is the Divine Mother as Kali. She is the aspect of divinity that stops at nothing and takes over everything. In the Shakta tradition, Kali is the supreme Brahman. Her wild temperament is the play of the universe. Her dark complexion shows the infinite source to which everything returns. The Western mind sees the blood and skulls around her neck as something evil and devilish. But in Hinduism, everything is divine. There are deities that are full of light, they are peaceful and joyous, and there are also deities that are terrifying and disturbing. The attributes of God span the whole spectrum of reality. This mature perspective is the reason why divinity is glorified in all aspects of life. To the mind and ego that seeks control and order, Kali is threatening and invokes fear. But to the heart that seeks surrender, her form is full of power and mercy. Ramakrishna, the great master of the 19th century, was like an innocent child before Kali. His disciple Vivekananda, however, was an ultra-rationalist who could not tolerate the ecstatic devotional states Ramakrishna used to fall into. He initially refused to bow down to temple images, but when faced with serious family problems, he was instructed to seek the blessings of Kali by Ramakrishna. Compelled by his grief, his heart softened, and when he finally turned to the image of Kali, he was overwhelmed by her divinity. This staunch rationalist was forced to abandon his judgments about the Divine Mother, but only after he approached her with humility and a sincere longing for help. In the same way, for the rigid atheist who insists on reason, Kali and other deities cannot be understood. The subtle arrogance that underpins an overly intellectual mind needs to be abandoned to appreciate the profundity of Hindu practice. Without doing this, the Hindu deities will always be looked upon with shock or ridicule. Before we judge a minority of Hindus for reacting to offensive posts, we should understand something of Hindu history. Unlike other societies, Hindu civilization has never sought to go out and conquer other nations. They were in fact a source of refuge for others who were being persecuted. Through the ages, India has been a land that has been ravaged by outside forces. Muslim invasions saw the destruction of temples and many violent atrocities over centuries. The British not only ruled India but attempted to destroy the Hindu identity. By changing the historical narrative and enforcing a Western Christian worldview, they created a colonial inferiority complex that still exists. The consequences of British rule resulted in the ripping apart of India into different nations, causing more social atrocities and unrest. Even today, there are Hindus falling prey to Christian missionaries and Muslim preachers that are out to convert. The great temples do not have autonomy. Unlike other religious institutions in India, they are shackled to state control. While it is important that Hindus do not become enslaved by self-pity, these factors cannot be naively brushed aside as forgotten events of the past. The injustices simmer in the Hindu psyche, making them feel like they have to take a stand for their tradition. But having said this, taking a stand should not involve online persecution. It should not descend into threats of violence. Apart from being wrong and immoral, such tactics only serve to make the problem worse. They only turn the abuser into a righteous victim of blasphemy laws. In the West and many parts of the world, we live in a free society. People can express themselves and are at liberty to criticize and mock whoever they want, and that principle has to be honoured. Hindus need to realise that claiming an emotional victimhood when a handful of individuals are insulting our tradition on social media or even in academia is not helpful. It either disempowers us through self-pity or makes us feel we have the right to justify an overly aggressive approach. Before we examine why others mock Hindu gods, we need to ask if we have done enough to honour them ourselves. There are around 1 billion Hindus in the world, but how many of us understand who our main deities are? Do we comprehend their nature and do we connect with their divinity? Are we a Hindu who enjoys sophisticated philosophy but views the various deities as tools for the less intelligent? Or are we perhaps a cultural Hindu that celebrates Diwali once a year but has no knowledge of the religion? Unless Hindus themselves see and experience the sacredness of the different deities, how can we expect the rest of the world to? These gods and goddesses carry the very meaning of our existence. But the lack of conviction from Hindus only contributes to other people de-sanctifying them. They naively end up being equated with superheroes, or worse, being used in offensive decorations. The solution is to create a tsunami of educated individuals who can robustly and honestly articulate the glory of Sanatana Dharma and push back against the abuse in a compelling and rational way. Our retaliation should be both strong and sincere. Hindus have to play the long game, which means taking the time to discover and practice the tradition they stand for. The aim is not necessarily to make everyone agree with everything we are saying, but it is to build awareness of what Hinduism truly is. We must create a fortress of understanding that strengthens the conviction of Hindus, enlightens non-Hindus, and withstands the scrutiny of rationality. There will always be individuals who enjoy provoking and causing offence, but it is possible through our conduct and education to make enough people have respect for our practices. Even if they do not believe in them, instinctively they will feel uncomfortable degrading them. Rather than getting hot-headed and emotional, when dealing with criticism and mockery, we need to use the great personalities of Hinduism as our example. When seeking to protect the honour of Mother Kali, we should look to the integrity that Lord Ram displayed. We need to imbibe the wisdom of Patanjali's yoga system. We need the humble longing of the great Bhakti saints. And we need to learn the visionary and intellectual prowess of our great acharyas such as Shankara and Ramanuja. In the face of abuse, it is these values that Hindus should demonstrate to the world. If we can do this, then those who wish to ridicule Hinduism will be viewed as dogs barking in the wind, and the true effulgence of Hindu Dharma will shine forth once more. Many thanks for listening.